This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Everybody to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks. I'm sitting. I always mess up something at the beginning of the show. It never fails. Sitting at the National RVIC Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo in Orlando, Florida, where we're all about to maybe survive or not a hurricane that is currently coming over us. The airport's closed. Nobody knows if they're going to get out of here. KOA doesn't know if they're going to get in next week for their show. But we are safe here in front of a beautiful Tent Masters setup here. That is part of the expo that opens tonight at 6 o'clock. That's why you hear forklifts behind us, because they've kind of let us sneak in here under the radar. With me, I've got Zach from Clockwork and Connor from Sage Outdoor Hospitality. Guys, do you want to briefly introduce yourselves? And first time on the recurring show, right?
Yeah, Connor Schwab, head of outdoor hospitality at Sage Outdoors. We help launching and expanding glamping and RV businesses throughout North America.
Can you guys hear him okay with a mic between them? Or good? Yeah. Okay, cool. Zach?
Yep. I'm Zach Stoltenberg. I'm with Clockwork, architecture and design. I lead our outdoor hospitality studio. So we work with new and existing campgrounds, glampgrounds, RV park owners, anybody that's in that outdoor hospitality space, and we help them build their dreams. So awesome. Pretty fun business to be in.
Glad to have you guys here, and you're going to be a part of the glamping show going forward. Second week of every month. We've obviously got Ruben Martinez here from the American Glamping Association Glamping Hub, and Irene Wood from the Fields, Michigan, guru of all things, right, Irene?
Guru of nothing. That's how that works.
Anything? What's new on your end before we talk about? I guess I should thank our sponsor for the show today, is Horizon Outdoor Hospitality. Before I forget that, they're a new sponsor of the glamping show, so super excited to welcome them. But Ruben, Irene, anything else going on in your world before we dive into a little bit about what's happening here too?
Irene, Ruben, I'll let you go first.
No, how'd the season end up? I know nobody was counting down the days, but how did everything wrap up?
Actually, today was the very last day of camp, so we blew everything out, got everything wrapped up. We're closed up for the season, and we're ready for already starting to think about 2023, which is just so crazy. Right? When you think about it. By the way, and I know, Connor, you just leaned in. Thank you for that report that you guys just put out, that glamping report.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure, yeah.
Really good read. Lots of good information. We're using it right now as we're thinking about what's next for the field. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're actually hoping to launch a more investor-focused report either at the end of the year or kind of early in 2023. That's a little bit more focused towards owners, operators, and investors. That'll be a little bit more heavy in rates, occupancy, revenue, unit types, operating season, things like that. So keep an eye out.
Will you be partnering with KOA with that too, or independent? Or
I think so, and probably Air DNA as well.
Okay.
So the glamping report that was released at the glamping show was really focused on the end user, the camper, the consumer.
Yep.
And so we want to release one that's a little bit more focused for the owners and the operators who are making strategic decisions for their business.
Okay, awesome. So I don't know if anybody knows who's watching the show, but KOA's show is next week. So Connor had partnered with them on the initial glamping report that they released during Ruben's glamping show there, which was a couple weeks ago. Everybody still talks about it, Ruben, all the great networking that happened there, just the tons of people and just the ability for them to kind of connect with people all over the world. So just hear nonstop great things about it. So thank you again for putting that. Obviously David and lots of other people worked on it, right? But
absolutely, yeah. I've got the easy job. I can just go around and talk to people, and people work a lot harder than I do to make sure everything gets where it needs to be. So I've got the looking.
See if we can do this. I'm gonna move this. Yeah. We're leaning towards you because I have this tiny little laptop speaker in my hand that we're trying to hear you from. So I'm just going to put it over here in the middle of the shot and see if we can make it happen. There we go. We got a little gangly cardboard box there. This is
go.
how we roll. This is how I roll, really. These guys are just kind of here, shocked and uncertain about what's happening. But so what else is new in the glamping world?
Yeah, I guess my question, Irene, for you would be, I mean, I'm always curious, and we can go in any other direction you guys want to afterwards, but every year the industry gets more mature, and we learn more and we learn more. And so now that, you know, it's always hard in the middle of a season or the beginning of the season to pick your head up and say, okay, let me kind of assess and reassess, and, you know, here's what I learned, or here's what's new maybe for next year. But as now I know today's kind of the last day for camp, but have you had a chance, or is there any kind of big learnings from this last season? Because I feel like it's a compounding factor. Like every year we learn more and more and more, and we figure out more and more and more, and we get more and more confused as well.
Yeah.
I think it's more and more complicated as well. But just curious if there's any, you know, from your camp, any big learnings from this last year.
Yeah. So, and this is really interesting because there are, and some of them are, you know, when you're one of the, I don't want to say one of the first, but when you're an owner operator who has now, you got to think 4 years under the belt. We've had the luxury of being able to move some levers that maybe other businesses couldn't, right? They're too large. They make some commitments that, you know, a small, mighty, nimble operator can do. So 2 things I learned. One of them is, and I'm actually, one of them is, I think that we're going to have to make some adjustments to the accommodations. So we did tents with bathrooms, and I think that it's becoming, I hate the way this sounds, but for us, maybe our guests, that it is really hard to meet a guest where they're at who is coming from camping and still providing them a superior experience while you're still navigating through a couple things. And one of them is bugs, heat, cold. I mean, tents are really, for a consumer who is a high-end consumer, which I would say that we fit in that $400 ADR kind of rate or, you know, spot. They don't want that. They don't want to see a stink bug. They don't want to see a black beetle. They want to be 70 degrees with no humidity. And we're just not able to meet that guest with a tent. So I'm rethinking through what an accommodation looks like. Secondly is, you know, I think we told you we made an adjustment to camp because we are small. We went adult only. And while that increased guest satisfaction, it decreased revenue. So, and part of it was, so I think a lot of people still want to share that experience with their kids. And so that has me thinking through, how does that look in the future? So what we did was we went through and we said, okay, we're going to be adult only with the exception of these few weeks. And then during these few weeks, we're going to allow kids. And then during those kids, we had camp actually quadrupled in size, right? Because every parent came with 3.7 kids. And, you know, revenue was increased during that time because you have extra head count and they're spending more money on food and beverage. But then we returned back to our adult only while our adults loved it. And like I mentioned, customer satisfaction was incredibly high. What we learned was we took a hit in revenue that I was like, damn it. Not that I didn't know. I mean, we knew that that was going to kind of be the case, but how much was it going to be the case? And, you know, when I look back through, Connor, your glamping report, when you do see majority of people want to camp with their kids. So it's in line with some of the data that I saw in your report as well. Now, it won't change what we do. We're going to still continue with that model. I think it's just because, again, our camp, this particular one is small. You know, we only have 20 units. But I think those were the 2 learning. Accommodations we need to make some adjustments on accommodations to meet the customer. And then the second thing is that you know, we're going to continue to maintain the adult only, but we're going to add more kid camp weeks to kind of maintain some revenue where we took a little bit more of it in the chin this year.
I just want to be clear. We're not laughing at you or anything you're saying, Irene. We're laughing because this expo hall is massive and literally every person with a forklift and trash can is walking by our aisle during the live show.
It's fine.
So.
Listen, it's not a screaming baby. It's not, you know, an animal, a raccoon in a tent. It's all, you know, you're fine. We've lived through it all.
But yeah, it's really interesting to hear those kind of anecdotes from you and just what you've learned and as you continue to grow. And I think it's so important to kind of constantly be reevaluating what your operations are and making sure they're always a best fit for awesome orange truck that's beeping nonstop too, right beside me too. But yeah, what do you think, Ruben? Have you seen that kind of similar? Jeez, he just whipped by us, didn't he? He's going like 30. Anyway, Ruben, have you seen some similar kind of data from other people you've talked to?
Yeah,
or similar type of thoughts?
You guys might want to throw on a helmet if people are zooming by, just in case. You guys don't get taken out. Make sure your life insurance is up to date. I think that's it. Irene, that's interesting because there's a category of questions that people typically ask, which are in the category of, should I be family friendly, right? Or not? And what does that look like? Do I do food and beverage? What kind of on-site activities? And there's always these front end questions of, you can't have your cake and eat it too in certain ways, right? You've got to figure out a strategy that's going to be in line with the theme and execution that you want to carry out and do that. Because as soon as you try and be everything, your brand almost becomes nothing, right? And that's tough. There's some great purchasing power with families, but there's also, certain things that when there's a bunch of kids running around, what does that do for the person who pays, that extra amount per night, and I think there has been, will continue to be this tug of war between this kind of mid-level tier decisions of, do I offer this or do I not offer this? Do I offer this? Do I have Wi-Fi or no Wi-Fi? Like, what does that do to the experience? And, fortunately or unfortunately, there really isn't a perfect answer for it. It's like whatever's going to work well for you and stick with it. And then, just be comfortable with what that means for your brand, because, that's interesting. Like, nobody else can answer that but you, right? And it's great that you figured out like what's going to work for you and then stick with it. Because no matter what, if you go out and all right, now we're going to do family friendly, then like, oh man, I wish we would have stuck. It's almost like you're always missing the other side of it, and the grass is always a little bit greener, and you just can't always be everything. You have to choose and make some hard choices along the line. So you said you're going to basically stick with the same model next year.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I'll just kind of share. So, when you look at the room rates, you do take, like everybody knows, when you have to bring in cots and extra bedding, you get a little bit of bump on revenue. So that revenue was lost. And then but what we did see was the spend per guest was actually higher by about 50%. So where we made an adjustment on rooms, maybe maybe occupancy wasn't as high or revenue wasn't as high because you didn't have the extra kid fee or extra person fee, we were able to make it up mostly in spend per guest with things like, obviously, Connor and Brian, I don't know if you guys know, but at the Fields we have a spa on site, we have a food truck, we have a sommelier on staff, so we have yogis every morning. So we kind of we target, I don't want to say the yuppie because that's not the right word, but just somebody who's left the city and they're coming in for 2, maybe 3 days, and they want everything to be curated. They do not leave site. So if we can pull every penny out of them while they're on site, then that's our goal. So, last year we had about a 35% per room rate expenditure. Now we're floating in the 45 to 50%. They're consuming all the things that we can possibly throw at them. Sailing, bike riding, wine tasting, cocktail class, farm to table dinner, all the things that are on site, which is great. We just got to kind of continue to find where that still meeting the needs of guests who have kids and they want to bring their kids and have that exact same experience with them, and preserving it for what we believe to be as an adult only spot.
Well,
we're going to stay in this adult only lane. That's us.
I've got a question for you. When you do your bookings, are you just booking the accommodation and calculating the fee just based on the unit, or are you doing it by guest? We were in a really interesting session here yesterday, and they talked about that exact issue, especially with families and kids. And they said, this unit normally would rent for, I don't know, pick a number, $250 a night or something like that. But it sleeps 6. And if a family wants to come and they want to bring 4 kids, when they do their booking, they input, we have 4 children and these are their ages. And then it adds additional fees for the number of guests. And they looked at that and said, well, it's all those other things on site that you have a larger party, you have a bigger family, more people. So are you just booking up by the accommodation, or have you ever considered doing your bookings by the number of guests that are staying?
So we always do it by the number of guests that are staying. So 2 guests is kind of what the price is for the room. Anything above that is an additional fee. And that's where, when I was explaining to Ruben earlier, that's kind of where the lost revenue was. When you have people who have kids and they're bringing 4 kids to a tent, while it doesn't seem like that revenue adds up pretty quickly. And so when we went to the adult only model, what we did was we lost room revenue. By that, I mean extra persons. But what we gained, in my view, was 2 adults will spend way more money on site because they'll use the spa.
Right.
They'll use, they'll rent bikes and they'll, bike down the bike trail. They'll go to wine tasting class. They'll show up for cocktails. They'll do the chef dinner. What we find is when people have 4 kids, they want to get the hell out of Dodge just to kind of entertain the kids at the beach, go to the ice cream shop, maybe get some I mean, it's just a different level of entertainment that we just don't have the infrastructure for. I mean, we really want it. We're a respite. We're in the middle of a working blueberry farm. We have, we tried to keep it simple, like simply sweet, right? Just everything that was on site was purposeful without feeling like we had overtaken the land. And so that's one of the kind of, when we were talking about what were the levers that we moved 2 this year. One, affected room revenue negatively. The other one positively affected camp usage, right? All the ancillary segments to the business got a bump. So.
Awesome. Can we improvise a little bit here? Steven, are you Steven? Steven is from Tent Masters. He's over here. You can't see him in the camera. We're going to move it. There's Steven.
Hey,
Steven's
Steven.
from Tent Master. We're sitting in front of, hopefully you can't see me now because the show's much better. But Steven's from Tent Masters. If you want to tell us a little bit about what we're sitting in front of, and we can just go look live on the show.
Yeah,
can we do that?
Absolutely.
It's probably going to turn into a disaster, but we'll try it. Go ahead. Take them through a tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, come on in. This is our common tent right here. Now, this is one of our smallest tents that we sell. This particular model sleeps 5 as is. This is one of the smallest tents we sell without a bathroom, so we have much larger sizes. But this is one of my personal favorite tents. It's actually one of our best sellers as well. But this one is 224 square feet, and if you step inside here, one thing you'll notice is that it doesn't look like 224 square feet. You actually have quite a bit of room here. We have what we call a triple bed over here, which is a full and a single on top, and then a queen bed in here. But if you pair this with a communal bathhouse, you have a nice affordable tent for $14,000 or $24,000 fully equipped that you can really utilize a communal bathhouse. You can get a good family of 5 in here, and really it's limitless with the possibilities that you have. We've seen a lot of our customers actually put a bathroom in here with a shower, toilet, sink, and have a couple's tent. Of course, it does come fully equipped with a kitchen. You do have a sink and a gas stove that's not pictured currently, but you can get a gas stove in here. And you have a nice covered porch where you guys were recording the first bit of your meeting. And you also have these tall windows right here and on the side here. And we did this to let in a lot of natural light. But this is our Kama tent, and you can either get it with 2 bedrooms, as you see here, which is default, and it comes with this bookshelf connector right here in the middle. Or you can actually take these canvas panels off and have one open floor space, a blank canvas per se, to really create whatever kind of floor plan you'd like.
Ruben, Irene, I'm sure you guys have heard of Tent Masters before. Do you have any questions for the man? Well, we've got his expertise here.
Hey, Steven, Ruben here. How are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you, Ruben?
Good,
Hello,
good.
Irene.
Hey, how's it going?
How's everything shaping up for the year? Kind of curious to see what kind of questions people are having at this point of the year. I mean, what kind of trends or, what are people really looking at now that I feel like the last few years there's been all sorts of cycles, all sorts of different demand changes, kind of what's happening now in the world of kind of the tent manufacturers, and what are people, really looking for, what kind of needs do they really have at the moment? What are you seeing basically?
Okay, no, great question. So outdoor hospitality has been absolutely blowing up the past few years. This particular year, though, post-COVID, we've really gone full hedge forward. We've seen a lot of people really want to attract not just couples but families. Before, glamping was always a millennial craze, and it still is, but we're seeing a lot of older generations going glamping, family going glamping, and really people of all backgrounds that want to experience something different with nature, and that's where glamping really comes into play quite especially.
Anything else for Steven? Well, we got him here.
I guess, Steve, what do you say to people? I mean, something we were talking about earlier is, tents have a certain life cycle, right? There's only so long that they can actually really last. There's more and more quality now than there is ever. There's more and more solutions to, winter climates. But are you still seeing kind of this division of people having to choose more permanent structures versus kind of tent structures? Or how are people thinking about the life cycle of tents versus the cost of tents versus life cycle of more cabin park models versus life cycle?
No, that's a great question. It's one that I really like being asked because a lot of people, they think tents last a few years, sometimes more, and a lot of times they'd be right. Now, our tents, I love to emphasize, they're temporary, non-permanent structures. They're just tents. However, we started in 2009, our manufacturer did. We're in 54 countries worldwide, and we're going on 13 years now in operation in many locations. So while our tents may be classified as a temporary, non-permanent structure, we're going 13 years strong, and we expect to see 15, 20 plus years with a lot of our tents. So from a traditional cabin standpoint, they still may have us beat in terms of longevity. They've been around for 40, 50, 60 years in some parks and still going. But, I mean, these tents are not something you're going to put up and have to take down and replace in a few years. I mean, you're going to get a really good long life cycle, one that's still yet to be determined for us. And it's a really neat unit, neat structure that, you can't really find at a lot of other places. It's glamping at its finest. And there's just something really special about experiencing a tent and staying in it while still having all the amenities that you would in a hotel.
Stephen, you hit a couple really good points there. Another thing to think about is from that life cycle cost, it's the upfront cost too. So a cabin may get you more of a season. It may last 40 or 50 years, but it's going to cost, 5, 6 or more times what getting a tent like this up and running would cost. There's a much bigger process with that and getting it permitted and getting it approved. Again, temporary non-permanent structure, there's still a process, but it's not as exhaustive.
Absolutely.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's about the experience, right? A cabin is still only going to generate so much in a your nightly rentals are going to be comparable to every other cabin that's available in your area. Whereas when you come in with something unique like a tent and really individual Instagrammable guest experience, your nightly rental reflects that, and you can collect a lot more too.
Absolutely. I mean, this industry is all about the experience, and it's a really nice experience. It's a really neat industry to be a part of, and just to come in here and walk into something like this, where at a $14,000 price point, at 20 all in.
Irene, can you still hear him?
I can hear you, but not them.
I'm sorry, say that again. Did we lose you for a second?
Oh, you guys are back now. We lost you there for a minute.
You can't hear us?
Yeah, now I can.
Oh, you got us back now? But if you guys can hear up over each other, again, like Connor, you come out here and kind of look around like where we're at. We're kind of in the middle of the expo hall here, or the Outdoor Hospitality Conference. So they're driving forklifts around. Truck that just passed us there. So it's kind of a big put together little thing. We were just trying to get in front of the wind and stuff. So just super excited to be here, but we're gonna have some stuff like that. So you guys can't still hear us. Oh, there we go. Irene said if you stay out of the tent, service is better. So, is there anything, Stephen, we should know about the cell blocking of your tent that
It's news to me. I know these tents do great in just about any kind of weather environments. You can leave this unit up year round, even in climates such as Maine, New York, Minnesota, even Nova Scotia, Canada. They're also great here in Florida, where if we got a hurricane income,
Which we do.
I would probably take it down. Protect your investment, insurance opportunities and companies out there. So I definitely recommend that. But as for cell block, your Wi-Fi blocking, that's
for some owners. If you want to make it, so maybe you should read.
And some of the best glamping experience I've had personally is no cell service, no Wi-Fi, me, nature, and a nice glamping structure, a unique experience, and there's something special about that.
Yeah, definitely agree. Well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Ruben, what else we got to talk about here? We're going to go ahead and sit down here in front of our little setup.
Yeah, I guess my next question for the group was going to be, because I'm always interested at this stage as we get into this like October, November, December. It's a funky time in the industry because you've got people who are either about to hit their high season because they're in these very warm climates, and this is when they get a lot of bookings. And then you also have a good majority of people that are just, hitting the reset button, looking to expand, looking for their next decision. They're looking to figure out how to adjust, and they can't, in this space, those that just do business as usual tend to struggle in the next year, right? And not saying there's nothing wrong with if you've got 4 units and you kind of run your 4 units next year, but usually people are making some adjustments, right, based off of what they've seen. So I guess my question to the group is, what are those things that we've seen this last year that cause a reaction to make some changes in people's operations for the next year, right? Because it's one thing to see something, but then it's another thing to actually make those value-added decisions to then say, this is what's going to help me next year. And so I kind of bring that up at this point in time during the year, because typically this is when people are saying, okay, oh crap, like what just happened this last year? Okay, what do we need to do to get ahead of it for next year? And just kind of curious to see what you guys have seen. Was it based off of more expansion, customer experiences and preferences? Is it more about, it really is a broad question, but I'm just curious because it happens every year. And those that are smart enough to kind of pay attention throughout the year, sometimes it's even just minor changes that they make that allow for them to really be set up in a different way. So that would just be my question for the group. If anybody has seen anything that, we place a bet on for next year.
So I think it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. We're actually on the architecture side, the design side. We've had clients that opened this year, that this was their first season in business. And we knew with, their limited budget, that they weren't going to be able to do everything up front. We worked with an awesome property and awesome owner in North Carolina. They had a very, very small budget, and we master planned the whole site. We got everything through their county planning and zoning and their approvals. And they said, we have a budget right now to do 8 of the 20 some tents that we had designed. And they had 2 months to get them up and operating before their main season hits. And so we got it done. We got them open. They opened up 4th of July. And I spoke with the owner, the client, last week. He called and he said, so this weekend is kind of our last weekend. We're starting to wind down a little bit. It's starting to get cooler. But he goes, we're actually getting more inquiries. And so we raised our prices, and then we got even more inquiries. And they've never operated through the winter months. And he's like, I feel like, maybe we should. And so can we add heaters? Can we do some insulation? Can we kind of stretch our season? And so I talked through some ideas of things that are easy that they could do right now, like adding a heated mattress pad to the bed. It's $150, $200 to order one on Amazon. And that tent may still get down to, 55, 60 degrees overnight, but if your guests slip down in between those sheets and it's 92, 98 degrees inside of that bed, then they're still comfortable. You're improving the guest experience. Well, your body temperature is 98 degrees, so that but no, we talked through some of those easy, quick things that they could do right away to stretch. Get it may be just 3 weeks in the fall and 3 weeks in the spring, but that's 6 weeks. We just created another month and a half of operation days. And then he brought up, he said, we used that there was an existing bathhouse that was on the site, and it was a cinder block building. It was all open inside, not a lot of privacy. And he said, we really got dinged on that this first summer. And a lot of our guests commented and said, I love the place. The tents are amazing. The site it's right on a beautiful river. But he said, we really had a lot of negative reviews and negative comments from guests on the bathhouse. And he said, so, I think we're ready to move forward with that. And that was one of the things we had done the drawings for it. We had designed it, but it wasn't in their startup budget. And so they said, we made some good money over this kind of first shortened season for us. But that's one of the things that we want to go and get done in this off season and make sure that is completely done and ready to go for next year. So, I think now is the perfect time to get started on those projects, or if you want to do an expansion or an addition, or if you have code issues, you have some compliance issues, like now is the time to dive into those, because it's not going to affect your main operations.
It is really interesting when you talk about seasonality, though, because I think there's a huge difference here between people who are starting pure glamping resorts, people who are adding glamping to campgrounds who
Absolutely.
are used to it being seasonal.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of these consumers who are coming into glamping, whether it's on a campground or by itself, as their first outdoor hospitality experience, expect it to be open all year.
Yeah.
Or at least a good portion of it, right? Is that fair?
Yeah. And we're, winter glamping, and if that's going to become a thing, is there's not a lot of people doing it, particularly with soft-walled canvas-based structures. And I'm really curious to see what happens. Definitely folks that are using hard-walled structures. We see that Airstreams and modern cabins, log cabins, are, on average open for 10 to 12 months a year, but then canvas-based structures 6 to 9. And so I think it's interesting when you're thinking about your site, and you have to obviously consider your local weather, what you want to do. And we see both models working successfully. Typically, like a canvas-based structure will make more per night. But when you extend that over the whole operating season, maybe a hardwall structure would make more. So,
Okay, that's fair.
And I think it's important to keep in mind too, where you're at, your location, has a big effect on that. But I think a lot of people think or assume, and perhaps wrongly, that the further north you are, the shorter your season is.
Definitely an assumption, yeah.
And I'm working with a wonderful couple that has a site in Minnesota, and they're doing domes, and that was something we talked about. And he brought up a really good point. He said, Zach, you got to remember, we're drawing from our area. We're drawing people from Minnesota. We're not wimps. Yes, we think people in this area will still come out and camp with us in November or
I
December.
don't think they're wrong. I mean, I live in Calgary, so.
No. And much the same way, you can think, oh, well, if I'm way down south, if I'm in Phoenix or Dallas or, somewhere that has really pretty mild winters, they still have a season too, because in July and August, when it's 110 degrees out, nobody wants to be outside and in a tent and without air conditioning. So I think, your site and where you are, it's always going to impact that a little bit.
And it's the mindset of the people, again, for sure, whether they're in Minnesota or Canada or whatever, but it's
Right.
also the people who have gone camping their whole life have the seasonality built into their mindset.
Right.
So they're more willing to accept that too.
And Irene, to follow up with that, Irene, from your property where you've got this higher end client, you already have a spa, you already have a sommelier, you already have, all this stuff. It's like, at what point do you say like, what the F else would anybody else want, right? Like, do you ever get to this point where there's going to be a ceiling of, because of the clientele that you have, does it become difficult to say, oh man, what could be, are they expecting more and more? And at what point, like, what else could you provide? Like, you already have all this stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you were talking about winter, I was like, no way in hell. And not that, but I was like, there's nobody that's going to schlep. None of my clients would schlep a bag of anything, through the snow to kind of get to it. But, as people continue to glamp, right? I mean, we have a lot of people now that fly in to see us who have stayed at an under canvas or collective retreats or a Firelight or, and so they've experienced different things. And so I think that one of the things that we always and continuously have to do is maybe there are some staples that never shift, right? It's like why you always go to certain places because you know that this is always going to be on the menu, or that, like your grocery store, like the back of your hand. We have guests now that are going to be in our 5th year in a row, right? So, but I think what we're able to do is mix up the experience by leveling up or using the space uniquely. So, with 30 acres, there are lots of little nooks and crannies that you can continue to recreate magic. So maybe, each year, we have this, like next year, one of the buildings that we had that we were using as private dining space, we're actually converting to a speakeasy. And so it's constantly reusing your space in a very unexpected way so that a guest will continue to spend their money on the ancillary things. So it's readjusting, reusing, reinvigorating. We were going to put in we have a cement slab that we use for a wedding. Paddle is it pickleball? Pickleball is becoming the hottest craze. We're converting that cement slab that's used for weddings into a pickleball court. And then we're like, okay, well, how do we amp that up? All right, well, we're going to do a little hut and a lemonade stand, but it's really going to be spiked lemonade, right? Because pickleball is known to be so it's the constant thought to how do we continue to maximize the space and stay true to the trends that the life cycle of trends that all of our guests who are consumers are doing, because that's what they want. We're all consumers. We want something new and awesome and different and exciting, but why do we still keep going back to the same thing? Because they're doing it too. So, yes, I think about it all the time. I'm already like ordering vinyl records for the speakeasy. We're changing out the front door to it so it looks a little bit more. We're getting a neon light, that kind of flickers. But we're doing all that stuff, right? And so that's the fun part of the off season. It's not revamping, enhancing the guest experience to meet the guest exactly where they're at.
Definitely amazing that, the analysis is so super critical. Like, I'm really glad that you're here, Irene, to kind of talk us through that and the mindset from your perspective as an owner.
Well, it's like engineering. I mean, does everybody talk about it? And I know that, when people are advisors or chatting about something, they're chatting about something in a way that has them. Are they frozen again?
I think so, but keep going.
Yeah, but, like engineers, it's really easy to kind of sit back and kind of say, this is what it's supposed to look like. But then it's the actual, when you start to build it or you're starting to operate it, you have to do different things. You have to respond to what your guests are. And oftentimes your guests sometimes aren't exactly who you are. So right. That's the actual fun and the challenge. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's like the bigger point too. And be curious to see what you guys think about this, where you look at the history of glamping, therefore looking at the future of glamping, and consolidation in the space hasn't happened yet, right? To a big degree, and it will, right? That's going to be the next thing that's going to be on the docket. But 10 years ago, there wasn't as many options, so you would just pick a place to go to and be like, great, it's got a tent, looks good, fantastic, right? Now, there's competition. There's great operators all over the place. Mm-hmm. And it's no longer good enough to just put up a tent and operate. It's no longer good enough to just kind of copy maybe what somebody else did, copy their playbook. You've got to have all these different things because the user taste has changed, right? They got a taste of, man, I really like this glamping thing. Like, what else is out there? and they don't always want to do the same thing. I think there's comfort to kind of like the 4 seasons of glamping of, hey, I know what it is. I know what it isn't. I'm great. Awesome. But I think the growth in the industry will always be people searching for those new experiences. The winter glamping. Yeah, I think there is people who are going to go do that. People who want, to come to the same property, want something different. The reality is that you need to now more than ever set yourself apart, or else you're going to fall behind, because you no longer are the, just a big fish in a small pond. Now there's a really big pond and a lot of fish. And so you just got to be, really differentiate yourself, which is just the natural progression of this industry. It has to happen. So you need the pool, you need the activities, you need the pickleball, you need, to be open year round. That's how people are, fortunately or unfortunately going to compete moving forward, because if you're not, somebody else is thinking about those things.
I think Irene brought up something that was a really good point too. And that's, meeting your guests where they are, always keeping in mind that we are not selling an accommodation, we're selling an experience. And hearing you talk, Irene, about some of those things that you're doing, some of those pivots and changes, and kind of being, flexible with some of your space. I think that demonstrates, you're really tuned in to your guests and the experience that you're delivering to your guest, and that's, speaks to a lot of wisdom on your part, and that's what makes good operators great operators. And I think, keeping in mind that it's guest experience should be what drives everything that we do, every one of those decisions that gets made. So I thought that was just great, and I really enjoyed you telling us about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Irene, earlier you were talking about, making the tough switch from being open to families versus going with couples. And that might have in some categories been a hit on revenue this season. But I think for next year, what you see when you make those tough choices and really define your customer and your experience is, whereas before you might have had couples and families coming to your site and they would have an experience that might have been a 4 out of 5 because, catering to one doesn't necessarily cater to the other. So all of your customers might be getting more of a 4 out of 5 experience. But moving forward, now that the entire experience is dedicated to one customer, you can really knock the socks off of all of them. And now they're having these 5 out of 5 experience. And then that's where the organic growth and the repeat customers come in, where they're going to book again next year. And then they're going to start bragging about it to their friends and tell them, oh, you've got to go to this place. It's an amazing getaway. They've got all these fantastic experiences and amenities. So,
and no kids.
Yeah, and no pesky kids. And so I expect, making those tough decisions and really having an incredible experience is going to pay off for you.
In the long run.
Yeah, in the future seasons. So, well done.
Just one other thing I want to add to anybody that might be listening as they're kind of thinking through. And I remember maybe it's the ability to have the privilege of perspective, but one of the things that we did originally when we first started the fields was we never went on a third-party booking platform. We didn't go on a Travelocity. We didn't go on an Expedia. And partly was a conscientious decision to ensure that our branding and marketing strategy reached the guest that was choosing us based on the experience versus based on a cost, right? So they weren't typing in Expedia, because I feel like the Expedia user is looking for the best value, right? They're looking for the cheapest value or the cheapest cost in a region. And one of the things that it did was, now it's always been 100% of our bookings are direct bookings, but it really found our guest identity. It made it very clear exactly who we were servicing, and it makes the decision making very easy because we don't have people choosing on price while at the same time somebody choosing on experience, which oftentimes are two different people. And so it's made it easier to make decisions or move levers and be able to see an outcome versus having a diversified portfolio of people who are like, I'm traveling to South Haven. The field has a coupon to them and they show up and they're miserable because they're camping. So, for anybody that's listening, that was a conscientious choice for us to make sure that we grabbed the right guest. Now, some other people might not be able to do it because they need to fill, every single tent or accommodation that they have. But do, right, to start.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you said that. So a friend of mine, Blake Smith of Walden Retreats, he took the exact same approach and wasn't using OTAs. And a big emphasis for him was he was like, we really want to own the end-to-end customer experience, and a huge part of that is priming guest expectations before they come on site. And that might be, hey, there might be weather or critters or whatever it might be, but like calling the guests before they came and letting them know what to expect from their experience so that can be matched. And then they're getting what they signed up for. And then also on the follow-up on the backside, you can follow up with them as well, take feedback, work on a next booking, something like that. But I was just curious if you do that at your site, Irene, with like something up front in terms of like managing expectation, because you get that luxury being that they go directly to your site.
Yeah, we do a lot of that. So we actually have a person that we have on staff. That's like one of my, I want to say, expenditures that every year when I'm like, should we be spending this to have a personal person answering the phones and making contact with every guest? But the reality is the answer is yes. She pays for herself, tenfold, because she not only does the initial contact. So our booking platform allows us to do some 3 pre-arrival emails. They'll have like their packing list, what to expect, what's going to happen the week of their stay. Then our concierge reached out directly to every single person, makes notes so I can read in the notes if they were able to make contact with them via email or phone, and then all the guest notes that are in there. Are they celebrating their 5th anniversary? Is it their 40th birthday? Their dog's name is Bo. All of those things that you would expect. And then afterwards, we actually follow up with every single guest with a postcard. So we're a very high touch organization. It was the only way that I was ever going to do this business. I do it because I'm absolutely crazy about hospitality and the guest experience. Most people know I don't love the outdoors that much. I'm actually a recovering camper. I have 5 brothers and a Boy Scout in the house. So my version of camping was very not what I do for guests. But the reality is that I am absolutely obsessed by making sure that every guest is wowed in the way that South Haven, Michigan can. And so those are the ways that we do it. Probably very similar to your buddy.
Well, and all of that goes into part of the experience, right? I mean, we've talked to, some of the glamping resorts that we do. We've had conversations about building custom reservation systems with WooCommerce, where you can control the whole experience instead of having a cookie cutter approach that you can get from. Like a lot of these big reservation systems are fantastic, but if you're really going niche and really going after the experience, and you really want to customize every aspect of it, then these can be built as part of e-commerce platforms that feed into CRMs that collect the data that Irene was talking about, that email people happy birthday when they're actually having automatically, right, without you even thinking about it. And those kinds of things, just again, one more way that they're going to remember you, come back to you because you were special to everybody else.
You brought up a really good point. I actually sat in a training session yesterday with the folks from New Book, and they were talking about some of the features that they have in their software. And absolutely, all those things can be triggered automatically, and they do, a 48-hour before email and a 24-hour before and a day of, check-in, like that constant communication back with those guests. They have it triggered even to where when they check out, a follow-up email gets sent and says, hey, we just want to make sure, everything was perfect for your stay. And if it wasn't, please tell us, what can we improve? What can we do better? So there's certain our booking platforms that already have that integrated that will do that all. You can custom, tailor your message and what you want to say. But you don't have to have one of those big expensive platforms either. It may be, like Irene mentioned, it may be a person, it may be staff that really focuses on that and, does that.
Yeah, it all depends on what you need. I mean, for most people, I think the new books, the camp spots, everybody else are going to work for them.
Yeah.
But in some cases, if you really want to go that extra mile and you've cleaned up everything else, then there are ways to do it with technology that are pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think the biggest kind of concept there too, which I don't think is, we talk about it a little bit because of how important it is, but it's also very simple and straightforward. And what we're talking about here is really being very, very clear with expectations, right? Because I can't tell you the amount of times that we've seen it over the year where, and Irene, you've talked about this too at your camp, where people freak out. It's like, there was a bug, there was a spider in the tent, or I'm leaving, there was a snake. It's like, yeah, no shit, you're in Mother Nature. Like, what did you think was going to happen? But
Like,
at the same,
this is the
yeah, at the same time,
for you guys. Don't let your kids get into this.
as glamping becomes this gateway to the outdoors, just a lot of people haven't had that experience before, right? And being overly transparent with, here's what this is like. If there is no Wi-Fi, you let people know that. If the bathrooms are subpar, you let people know that. Whatever it happens to be, because sometimes people try and hide that because they're like, oh, this isn't the best part about my property, so I don't want to have photos of, maybe this side. Like, the more transparent that you are, people walk in and say, okay, this is what I expected. When people show up, and even if they expected there to be Wi-Fi and you didn't advertise there was or wasn't or whatever it was, and there isn't Wi-Fi, they lose it, right? And they say, well, it doesn't matter where they are, the beautiful scenery or the accommodation. They just get triggered by these small things that were expected to be there and weren't there. And so it is the job, and it's a hard job, to be overly transparent of, here's exactly what it is. Here's what it is. Because for many people, this is already so much out of their comfort zone, right? They're going out into a remote place.
So you're suggesting, Ruben, just to be clear from the American Glamping Association, if there's a snake in your tent, you should let your guests know that there's a snake in the tent, right?
You should have that's part of the experiences. You can just have a snake infested tent, and you can actually charge more for it.
Yeah.
So
there are probably people, there are probably fan clubs who
It's
would do that.
Instagrammable. For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Selfie with the snake. Yeah, you charge more
Ruben,
for a rattlesnake.
You bring up a really good point with that, though, and I think it goes back to that guest experience component. And one of the things that I like to say and that I talk with our clients about, there's one thing that's common sort of throughout the glamping and outdoor hospitality industry as a way that creates a positive guest experience, and that is authenticity. When we look at the markets, when we look at the demographics, the people that are really making up more than half of the guests in glamping and camping today, they're mostly from the millennial and Gen Z kind of generations. Those are the age groups that are funding the industry right now. And I can say this because I are one. Millennials have grown up, with technology. We can smell bullshit a mile away, and finding really good, true, authentic experiences are rare. And so I think, being open, honest, transparent about it, it's giving the guests that authentic experience of, yes, this is exactly what I expected, and I feel like I'm getting a good value, and that this is something that I enjoyed and something I want to come back and do again.
So basically, we did this whole show wrong because we didn't prepare them for the noise and the background. So, okay, I got you.
Well,
we're showing them the good side, the beautiful tent master's tent.
I think it's really interesting because it's very easy as I was listening to you all, I kept thinking, I run the fields, I have 20 tents. It's really easy for me to manage the guest experience. A lot of things that we just talked about, we have a checklist that we go through when they check into their tents. And it's like, listen, if you leave cheese out on your desk, Ratatouille's going to show up. I mean, it's like all the things that you would expect. But the reality is that and Ruben, this industry is exploding as things start to get scalable. It's like, how do you replicate an operator at 10 different locations? And, I think that one of the things that we're really excited about, and I'm happy to share anything and everything that we have with everybody, is that we've kind of came up with some training manuals that you could hand to anybody who was kind and who had a servant heart, who was one of your employees. And you said, these are the steps to walk through to really ensure that you were setting your guest up for the best experience by managing expectations from check-in, before check-in, right? Pre-arrival, arrival, and then departure. And I think that that's where some of the formalization of hospitality is going to be so exciting to watch, because operators are going to have to become much more sophisticated, particularly if they want to scale, because they can't replicate themselves at 20 different locations. But yeah, we have this checklist, and it's literally hilarious, because somebody's like, we'll follow up with them just as you described, and we're like, hey, listen, I didn't know that there was going to be something. And then we're like, well, on this day you signed this piece of paperwork and you initialed next to X, and and we kind of make it funny. We're like, I'm sure you were so excited and to eat your s'more that you forgot to read exactly what you were signing. But, it does protect somebody from going, oh, well, they never even said anything to me. So, we're getting sophisticated. It's a lot of fun. This industry is incredibly exciting. And to be an operator in it is, I feel a real privilege.
Super excited to see where this industry goes. And I know we got a couple minutes left here before we got to wrap up. I feel like, as always, I say we can talk for 2 or 3 hours about some of these subjects, right? I mean, we're here at the ARVIC again, National Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo. They've been talking about things like EVs and how the industry is going to change. We had a great session at the Glamping show in October about off-grid solutions and just all kinds of new ideas, and things are changing. I've got on my phone pulled up here as well as looking at the outdoor recreation economy. Released their report today that says outdoor recreation accommodated for 1.9% of the total GDP for the United States, $454 billion of revenue, ranging from 23% Hawaii for outdoor recreation employment to 6.9% Michigan. So, just huge. It continues to grow. Glamping is obviously a part of that, RV part of that, but it's just really exciting to be part of this industry and see how it's going to change. We're just in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's been interesting too, coming from a glamping background and kind of being at the glamping show. Everybody's very, I think, well informed and educated and following the trends in glamping, to coming to ARVIC, which is it's a great show. And it's predominantly RV and campground owners that are at this show. So these are all operators. These are all people that have run successful businesses, and they have established resorts, and they're starting to kind of wake up to that too, and going, what's this glamping thing? And they were talking about that like 2 years ago, and I remember thinking, oh, well, it'll never last. And now every other campground around us has added cabins and covered wagons and tents, and we got to get with the program. So it's been really kind of cool to see the shift in the perspective here, as all these campground owners are fully embracing glamping now, and not just dipping a toe in, and not, oh, well, we'll try 1 or 2. No, they're coming in and they're putting 20 in their parks.
Well, we got a couple minutes here. Any final thoughts from Ruben, Irene, Connor, Zach? Quiet, or we're just lagging?
No, I think we covered a lot. Thanks for taking the time to connect today. That was always a good conversation, solving glamping theoretical issues one month at a time. So thank you guys.
We'll try to do better next month. We'll try not to have as much background noise here.
No, that's what we'll do every single time now. Everybody will have to bring their own front loader. If you don't have a forklift, you can't hop on the call.
It might work. It would at least match people. We would set expectations, right? That's the important thing.
Yeah.
So there we go. We're communicating with people. So thank you guys. I really appreciate you joining us again for another episode of MC Fireside Chats Glamping episode. Again, we're here at ARVIC's OHCE. There's so many just amazing things that are happening in this industry. We're part of all these educational sessions here at the Expo, KOA's Expo, stage work with them on the American Glamping Report, North American Glamping Report. And I'm sure they're going to cover that during their conference here in Orlando too. Hopefully everybody's safe in Orlando with this hurricane that's coming over us. And again, we will see you guys here in a month here, back with us again, Ruben and Irene, Connor and Zach. So thank you guys. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Stay safe.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.